Okay, it looks like we are running here. Let's get our little advert up. Evolution Hour, January 3rd, 2025. Nostalgic in our year of doom for analog devices and a simpler world where things were simpler. Well, we're stuck here now. Okay, remember our little website? All that stuff is openly shareable. A lot of little fun stuff going on in there. Okay, as you know, we are continuing the saga of finding out what information Sarfati and Tay want us to know about regarding dinosaurs and their various ilk in relation to their creationist mythology, and what they leave out, which, as we've seen episode after episode, is a lot. There's a part two that we will be getting to in regards to Michael Ord, a perennial misrepresenter of data field. And then I got a little menu up in here. Okay. Oh, alrighty. There we go. Wow. Pulls up the little screen up. How cute. They keep on modifying all this stuff, and I have no idea what some of these little things are until I actually find out. Hello, Barbara. And there's sort of a third part to this, which I'll be inserting right in here. Gunter Bechly, the intelligent design paleontologist, passed away this week. And not under pleasant circumstances, apparently. He had a big traffic accident there in Europe, and there are some murky issues about to what extent this was not exactly accidental, in that might have been intentional on his part. It's very strange little things. There was some reporting on it, but we'll just simply suffice to say that tragically, Bechly has exited the scene. Good morning, Brian. However, it required some slight adjustments to the text that Jackson and I are doing regarding Volume 2. Posthumously, we're not exactly going to be going easy on Bechly, just as we haven't gone easy on the late Jonathan Wells and others. When they're misrepresenting their material, they're misrepresenting their material. It does clearly mean that whatever cachet that the intelligent design movement had with Bechly on their front, they'll have to scout around for another intelligent design paleontologist, and good luck on that one. So that's going to be a little sidebar. At any rate, the Sarfati and Tay, as you know, have been wading into marine reptiles, and they have just a small section. I'll show you a little snippet from the book here to give you some idea of how they handle these little things. It's nicely illustrated, but quite generic in terms of the look of the thing, just little subcategories, not a huge amount of notes. Mosasaurs are, they look kind of like a pliosaur with a smaller snout, but they're in fact a different group of marine reptiles that are less closely related to the plesiosaurs in their crowd than others, and in fact are still an ongoing debate as to what extent snakes, marine snakes and others, may have derived from mosasaur lineage and all that kind of stuff. That's an ongoing bit. They've got kind of a quirky systematic issue because a lot of the fossils are relatively fragmentary. There's a brand new one that just came out that there's some dispute as to whether it's a fake or not. So it's exciting. Oh, fix my wrench. Oh, yes. Okay, great. I've never quite been able to master the wrenches on this end of the fence. On the regular YouTube things, there's a little menu for that kind of thing. But since I'm operating from a sidebar on this, we're on our own, kids. Anyway, all Sarfati and Tay did in terms of the science material was riff off a 2016 paper by Jimenez Hood, Dwebro, and Caldwell, which was just a specific revision on a taxon. But it did have some material in the full paper, which unfortunately I won't be able to link to. I'll only be able to put a link up to the general abstract of the thing. But they did allude to the general phylogeny matter. And that's an issue which, of course, We have no idea what Sarfati and Tay think because they have never attempted to do any baromenological systematics regarding anything other than the stuff that's on the Noah's Ark, and even that they're not very good at. Also, this is another matter where they're throwing in the towel on carnivory, where they're accepting that mosasaurs were carnivorous. And so there were critters flitting around before the flood was over that were doing all of that. And they just don't seem to mind too much, even though that is a mutated position from the traditional creationism of when I was growing up earlier in the 70s and 80s. Anyway, Wikipedia page on mosasaurs reflects how the taxonomy is rather complicated by stray outlier taxa and limited skeletal examples. Often they're just known by fragments. And therefore, there are uncertainties in that is going on. There's a lot of various work on that, which isn't open access, alas, but there is a 2021 paper from Longrich, which is going into quite a bit of detail. Then there's also I'll be able to put an extended abstract up from a 2024 work by Longrich, which fills in an awful lot of the general perspective about where they are on that. That still puts them light years ahead of where the creationists are on that. Now, let's see if I can show a little bit on here. Just to give you some idea about the how complicated it can get. Although it's a lot of micro issues as to which taxa are closely related to what. But there's a paper that unfortunately I can't have the full link on it. It's from Strong et al. In 2020. But that gives you some idea of all the different variations of looking at the varying competing phylogenies and trying to work out the little fiddly bit details on that. We'll see whether the creationists can ever get up to speed on that. Now, the part 2 relates to our dear old Michael Ord. And that one is a 2023 piece that he did, How Accurate Are Marine Microfossil Transfer Functions. Not a terribly long piece there in the Journal of Creation. But CMI lobbed it just last June, like they want us to notice this. Ord is trying to cast doubt on the idea that you can measure past ocean temperature by fossil foraminifera. Except the 3 papers he riffs off of only document why some microfossils are more reliable than than others. There's a one from 2008 by Steinke, and a 2013 one from Telford, and a 2019 one from Yonkers. And you'll be able to find the full texts in Ord's piece and link to them as well, in addition to the links that I'll be putting up on that. The fun little part in terms of sloppy scholarship is on the last 2 papers, the Telford and Yonkers. Ord has the journal listed as climates of the past rather than climate of the past singular. So he wasn't too attentive about the little details of stuff. That can happen in a lot of different people in scholarship. Your eyes glaze over and you forget to put the right source up, or you forget to put the right journal number, or when you're typing in the information, you get the volume number wrong, or page numbers inaccurate, or leave off an author. To err is human. To correct, however, requires a sound method. So far, creationists have to chase down horse and buggies. Yes. Yeah, they're consistently behind the curve. And although when you see creationist apologetics, it sounds like they're at the cutting edge of things. And so much of the material that you see in Acts and Facts from ICR and the Answers Research Journal and CMI are parasitical, in that they are riffing off of contemporary literature in their current issues to kind of give the impression that they're paying attention to that stuff. But virtually none of that stuff are they involved in. And it's not their own work. So you have this schizoid bit of when you'll see work where they're simply repeating their own self-citations and in-house stuff versus the material that actually is making headway in the general science literature that they have to parasitize off. The Sarfati and Tay book parasitizes a relatively small amount of material. It's only about a quarter to a third of their citations so far are from technical literature. The vast majority of the stuff they're culling from their in-house material, and of the stuff that they are drawing off of, so far they're running around 60% misrepresentation. So it's not very good on that. Anyway, that kind of gets us up to speed. There's also a paper that's brand new and turned out to be fairly brand new, 2020, about I have a little blip on in here. That's it here. Lovelace et al. 2025 on pushing. Yes, that is brand new paper. Pushing dinosaur expansion farther back. I suspect that you will be seeing some creationist riff off of this eventually because they can't resist it. But you'll be ahead of the game on the front. It's all about the idea that early dinosaurs were thought to have been occurring in the northern hemisphere only and then proliferating outwards, whereas it looks like some early stuff is going on in the southern hemisphere as well. So they have a little breakdown of all these little taxa, and that's an open access paper. That would be the same people who have been working on all this subject matter for decades to kind of fill in all the little details. It nudges the origins of or proliferation of dinosaurs back, maybe 10 million years or so, which is still early in the later Triassic period. And will continue to raise interesting biogeographical questions, climatological questions. Was there something about dinosaur metabolism and the interaction with a less temperate climate and more generically hot? This is still in the waning days of the Pangea supercontinent. It's during the Triassic that the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, the CAMP, starts going on, which at the time would be where the east coast of the United States is and Europe. And so what eventually becomes the Atlantic Ocean is just starting to open up. And so it kind of zippers in from the top down. And that also produced climatological effects. And of course, with carbon dioxide popping out there, temperatures and that are going up and so forth and so on. The climate it stabilized. The earlier Triassic, remember, had that super rainy period where it was raining a lot over a few million years. They've even got a little special zonal name for it. The dinosaurs are appearing well after the climate has settled down into its new mode. And whether that's telling us something about the competitive environment, because there's an awful lot of little teeter-totter shaped bipedal critters knocking along that are very close to the dinosaur divide. But it's the main dinosaur groups that have the fur and a few little other diagnostic features that start really taking off. And other animals don't disappear completely, and you've got the early mammals are hunkering down and becoming peripheral around the edges. And there's an awful lot of stuff going on, like our little mosasaurs that we just discussed. You've got the mosasaurs appearing in an environment when ichthyosaurs have been on the wane. Mosasaurs are really starting to dominate down in the Cretaceous period. You also have pliosaurs and plesiosaurs doing their little thing. So think about what's going on here. You've got biogeographical things. You have continents shifting. You have oceans opening up. You have zones of vegetation and things changing. Mountain ranges are appearing. Plate subductions are taking place, which takes time and involves a geographical landscape that's running from the Triassic period, 200 some million years ago, down to 65 million years ago. That's a vast stretch of environmental shifts that are going on, which in the creationist model was scrunched together as a single cataclysmic blip. So naturally, in their dynamic, they can't pay any attention to the kinds of breakdowns of systematics and to see what forms are going in one period versus what you see going on 10 million years later, or 20 or 50 million years later, depending upon the luck of the draw on the fossil material. Which means, in principle, creationists are just sublimely incapable of ever working out a deep time model because the best they could do is the kind of thing that Nathaniel Jensen does with genetics, which is simply just compress everything and then try to do maybe sliding scales to get around something or where or other. The reason why Jensen bogs down at the genetic end is because he's dealing with human beings, and therefore they have an actual population biology and actual genetics that we can look at. The creationists that are dealing with Mosasaurs and others don't have that to worry about because the forms that you would be dealing with are extinct, and therefore there's no contemporary genetics to go on. Is that the paper by Sterling Nesbitt, Washington U? Let me see. The Rethinking Dinosaur Origins, I don't see Nesbitt on it. It's Lovelace, Kuffner, Fitch, Rogers, Schmitz, Schwartz, Leclerc, Diaz, St. Clair, Mann, and Ribatera. And there may be some other ones. There's always new material going on that's refining and improving the boundary layer of what's going on. And a lot of the paleontology can deal with things independent of the actual fossil material, although you have an awful lot of the fossil material. But they can be dealing with flora, they can be dealing with climate, and in fact, if you're dealing with the bones from like herbivores, you can do carbon balances and other oxygen isotope balances, and that where certain biological systems are preferentially attuned to certain kinds of balances over others, and so they can get clues about temperature range and so forth and so on, in the same way that foraminifera can measure things about the temperature. And so everybody is working synergistically to pull in more and more information from more and more disciplines. That's not what you see in creationism. Everything is a slice and try to conquer approach, where they'll tunnel vision in on just a narrow little blip and authority quote a little bit here, and then say, flood, the Ice Age, blah, blah, and cram it into their framework. Some of them will be more energetic on this subject than others, presenting a greater range of sources that would require more material to burrow down to find out what ones they're misrepresenting and what one they're just putting up as fluff. One of the advantages of a lot of these shorter articles is they're dealing with a relatively small amount of information. And so the typical Answers in Genesis or the Journal of Creation thing, their little sidebar stuff that Ord is prone to be putting up are only a few pages long. They're very, very tight. In fact, in a lot of instances, the longest articles that you find in those journals are ones on theology, where they'll be going into trying to discuss what 18th century Christian preachers were thinking about stuff, or wading into the little exegesis of certain Hebrew things to try to wriggle around how long days are and so forth and so on. And Answers in Genesis, a lot of the postings at their websites that are the longest that I've encountered are ones that are on theological things, like trying to explain why there's violence and death in the world, or why there are parasites or something like that. And they're having to give a theological spin for it. Nothing terribly novel about that stuff. If you look at their apologetics and compare it to earlier material, it's pretty straightforward. Oh, Procrest. Let me see whether I can see what that little puppy is on there. There we go. Let me, whoops. Find that little puppy. Oh, look at that thing. Wanting to only put up a little show. Maybe I got a little menu to see if I can. Nope. Yep. I'm trying to get a thing where I can squook in there to. Well, I'm not at all sure how I can pull that. No. Normally, if I were to just be clicking on one of that, I would just be able to do it. But the menu for either show or hide pops up and obscures it, so I can't click onto the bloody little thing. So you'll be in better position watching it on YouTube than I will. Yeah, going material. Any major new paper, especially if it's shaking up some presumptions on things, it will likely get riffed on eventually by somebody in the anti-evolution movement. The stuff that gets noticed the least is the little minor stuff down in the weeds, in terms of particular taxa and particular detail things. The other thing that is a tripwire for these sorts of things is if it gets big coverage in the regular media, because then, somebody might bump into it accidentally and they have to, have to manage cookies to release. At any rate, what I tried to do as a general principle here, as you may have noticed, is to give as often as possible full text links on the material, so you don't have to take my word for it. As oracular to take my word for it, you should be able to look up the original material. Plus, as I discovered on more than one occasion, in source checking other videos that I've looked at, whether I agree with the person or not, will often bring up additional discussion that bears on the points at issue. For example, there was a video that I just watched with, suddenly forgotten his screen name. And he was having a discussion, I think, with about Richard Dawkins. Hemet Maida was on it, and they were talking about the trans issue and how Dawkins has blown himself to smithereens on his reputation on that front. And genetically engineered apologists or genetically engineered scientists, something like that is the fellow's young guy. Anyway, they were alluding to some technical material and discussion of some of the ins and outs of how you diagnose trans issues and how the nomenclature has changed over the years. And in checking up on that material and documenting it from my end, I discovered quite a bit more material that there's a little small camp of people that are associated with the anti-trans bloc that are continuing to push their argument and getting pushed back in the technical literature. So you learn more things that way by finding out, this thing caused a little bit of a kerfuffle, and we can find out what it is. Learning experience to not take people's word for things. And whether if you encounter somebody who puts direct links up in their description, that's the ideal. Some are a little more crunchy, like they will be doing effectively no more than what I was doing here. But Nick Zentner takes that approach. He doesn't stick on screen shares and the like, but he's at a collegiate environment, and they have a website where all the papers are available, direct access PDFs, so nobody has to bother about that aspect. So there's a lot of different ways you can go about doing it. But the main point is to make it as accessible as possible and as much as possible to home in on material that can be readily searched out. If you find just the screen name of what a thing is, I've frequently will be going through and I will copy down what the text is and then do a Google search, and I can locate the paper that way, even if they don't bother to put the direct linkage up to it. And then I can hunt around to see if I can find full text, and then also find out what additional discussions are. Plus, being in a network of people is also a jump starter. Co-author Jackson Wheat, I was just looking through the paper he did on the text script for his Barnacles video, which will be coming out fairly soon. And good lordy me, I discovered none of the technical papers on all the ins and outs of the barnacles and that that he was discussing in that were in my reference bibliography. So naturally, that all has to go in, and so that we have a nice little field. And so if any of those topics come up where we're drawing off, and we have in frequent cases, both for the first volume and will be in the second, material that has been discussed in his various videos, I've got the source material already plugged into my data field, and that speeds up the process of putting up the documentation and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, oh yes, Nick Zentner is a national treasure. He's probably got what could be accounted as a global geology school, where he's got people who follow him all over the planet when he does the live chat discussions with various people in their series. He'll often be seeing who is all in the live chat, and a lot of them are regular people that pop along. Some are regional ones, but people all over the planet have taken a look at this. And I think he's an absolutely stupendous example of how somebody operating at the college level can interact because they act as a conduit for cutting edge research that relates directly to the kinds of things that they would be discussing in the course of their regular college courses. And I think geneticists and astronomers and people in other technical fields should do very well to emulate that node. Now, to the extent to which it helps that Zentner comes from a theatrical background, he did like improv stuff in theater in his pre-geology days, that can help for the sheer smoothness of his presentation and his handy use of props and all the kinds of things to put things on an explanatory level. Whereas if you are a kind of stuffed shirt didactic sort where you're used to be giving the lecture but not necessarily interacting in that kind of a way, it may be a little bit less integrated on that. So there's an element of theater on it. Oh, I'm seeing a cute little geology Nick post on there, which I can't click on because otherwise it'll just put up that stupid little menu. But yeah, Nick Zentner, he's not all that far from where I am. He's at Central Washington State University, which is in Ellensburg. So whenever I'm going back and forth to the coast to visit my relatives there, I'm passing right through the town where that Central Washington State University is, which is just about halfway between Spokane and Seattle. So if you need to locate it on a map, it's in that little spot. It's out kind of like in low prairie land, but he's within very short driving distance of the Columbia Gorge and the Cascades. And so a lot of the stuff that he does, particularly during the summertime when the weather is a lot nicer than it is now, showing all the various geology stuff. But he's absolutely stupendous. And there are so many people on the internet who are operating at a much more sophisticated level than I do and have accessibility of things that act as great gatekeepers of their own particular areas of expertise. Erica / Gutsick Gibbon being an obvious example of that, Dan Stern Cardinale, and the videos also that Zach Hancock has done. These are all just wonderful and splendid stuff. There's the more people, the merrier in this area to act as purveyors of accurate information and conduits to connect up with people so that people can work out stuff, because there's not enough time in the day for anybody to be a super polymath. But it is certainly feasible, and as an old fart, I can explicitly say it's perfectly feasible to keep abreast of a lot of stuff if you know who to pay attention to act as the tripwires, both on stupid Twitter, which is fading away as Musk destroys the bloody thing, and the Blue Sky forum that is a much quieter place and just as informative. A lot of the science people are moving on over to there. That's another place where people are sharing the current material, and so I don't have to try to keep up with thousands of technical journals. If you pick the right people in the right networks, that they'll be bringing material up like that for you. And so it speeds up the whole process magnificently. Yes, it's a great campus there too. We have our Washington State colleges have an excellent range of things. The Darwin Day thing that's done at EWU, my old alma mater, out at Cheney, does wonderful stuff every year. And I think of the absolutely wretched high school, middle school system in Louisiana, Jackson co-writer had gone through. And I know firsthand because I've walked around in some of the place, because one of my relatives is a retired school teacher from there. So we know exactly, well, I'm not sure she is retired, maybe. Anyway, but they're so bloody underfunded. I think her jaw would drop if she ever got to see what the new Glover Junior High School, or middle school, they now call them, that just opened up within walking distance, and how the computer rooms and the technology material and all of the cutting edge and high quality supplies and all the stuff that goes on that we just take for granted here in Washington State, that would be like considered, holy moly, wow. That's the difference between the way underfunded stuff. You find the same problem just crossing the border over to Idaho, where they have a really terribly underfunded system. Often they're not making the bond issues and that required to do a lot of these things, and they're local colleges that are potentially running out of money, and so we're a little more attentive to these things in Washington State. So anyway, that gives you some of the material going on in there. Let me put up my little thank you sheet to our people who have continued to hold the line and help with our little project from month to month. I would love to thank everybody, our colleagues and researchers and assistant researcher level and friends and the legacy patrons that have come and gone over the years that I well reflect about how trying times can be economically for people. So every little bit that comes my way in terms of the patrons, I absolutely am uber grateful to it. And all the more so as we slide into Trumplandia, to where who knows what kind of safety nets are going to be knocked out, the props out, the NPR and public radio, public television are another targets again to try to be unfunded. We have fairly strong independent things here. I think we probably would find ways around it, but it still doesn't help matters. And that degree of insular anti-evolution, anti-intellectualism that occurs in the Trump-least ideologues is a problem that in many areas would be singularly bad. So it's going to be an exciting little time to work along here. Oh yeah, that's I'm on Blue Sky, same name here as I have elsewhere. Most of our network have worked under that. We also have a separate area where we've moved our discussions on our science friend things off of Twitter. So we do a little bit of sidebar on that. You know, these are things that are private chats and that we can operate. But we're finding a lot of independent ways to get around these things so that we can continue to do what we want, no matter what happens on stupid Twitter. I'm still on Twitter just to call attention to things that need to be called attention to. And as we move farther into Trump 2.0, there's going to be more opportunities for those sort of things. When the shit starts hitting the fan this year and next and beyond, people who have noticed that it's going to be hitting the fan and what is the nature of the shit and what caused it need to be on hand to be able to remind people of these things, so that they can't go through a misrepresentation, demonization thing where they try to bring in Jewish space lasers or some other rationalization mode, which they will. The Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world are going to come up with the most claptrap QAnon-ish explanations for why everything is falling apart, rather than the simple things that it's the policies of the Trump administration. And so we got to be on hand to be able to bear true witness and to try to wean as many people onto sound method. I'm very much an evangelist on the methodology front, because I think this is one of the reasons that we got in the mess that we are, that we have way too many people. I'm now in soapbox mode. Way too many people in the country who are not necessarily idiots, but they live in a very insular world where their own personal experience has never experienced genuinely bad times, and they don't interact with detailed analyses that help explain things better. So if somebody is in a situation where they're having a hard time maintaining their house mortgage, and they're worried about prices having nudged up a bit at the grocery store, these are things that are viscerally directly affecting them. The kinds of background information that would say that, no, the economy is actually very strong. It's stronger than anybody else on the planet at the moment. Biden administration did a spectacularly good job of shepherding us out of the pandemic blurb, and yet he got absolutely no credit for it. It's one of the least popular presidents in recent times, and I think for totally unjustified reasons. That if you just looked at the numbers of things, interest rates, unemployment level, inflation level, and all the rest, Ronald Reagan would have been giddy with delight to be running in 1984 on Biden's economy. The numbers are that good. But because how many people can remember the dynamics of the 1970s stagflation to compare it to, you've got an awful lot of people who have never known bad times. They've known slightly less good times in the occasional recessions, the 2008 one being the most serious one. But then again, that look how long ago that is. So you would have to be well into your 20s or 30s to even have a generic remembrance of that, let alone how old do you have to be in order to be able to remember the Nixon wage and price controls that spurred the big inflation during the 1970s and way bigger than anything during the Biden administration. So that level of insularity, and regular legacy media are terrible at this. And across the board, nobody does source methods questions. They just don't pay any attention to it whatsoever. And this is a thing that just drives me up the wall and needs to change, because it's when you explore what sources people rely on, if any, and do they fact check them, if any, or do they even know that they need to do that? I would think that if you started to ask somebody from Tucker Carlson to Donald Trump to Joe Rogan, and there may be people in the progressive wing that would also have problems in a source methods analysis, but it's going to have to be done. And the more people do that to where it becomes routine, that it's not good enough simply to have a position. You need to be able to document why you think that position is appropriate and have the source material available so that people can look to see whether or not you have your head up your ass or not. Because we've got way too many people in political power here and in other countries that would flunk a source methods test, hands down. I describe them generically as the Tortugan minds. It's dangerous to have such people in power, and I'm afraid we're going to have to find out just how bad things can get to see just exactly why those sorts of people should not be in positions of power. And we're going to have a big sea change to be able to change how we're dealing with this. We have yet to really come to grips with what it means to have an instantaneous information economy that is not necessarily grounded in sound method, to where you've got a vast array of material out there that is claptrap, and you have to hunt around to find the correct material that's coming from reliable sources. And if people are simply going on, well, how confident the person is, the Graham Hancock level of certitude, that's not good enough. And we're going to find out why it's dangerous to have that level of ignorance operating in our elected officials. Nature and reality and economic dynamics don't give a rat's ass about what your ideology is. It's going to do the thing it does based on what actually is policy and actually are the things impacting the real world. And so just as Donald Trump cannot go out there and wave a magic wand to make climate change go away, or wave a magic wand to make prices roll back the way he's had promised, but is now already revamping all of that. That's the direction that we need to go. And it's going to have to be done in not merely the public discourse that we do and the actions that we do as citizens. We as citizens need to demand of our politicians that they put sources up, reporters, so long as we can keep also a free and independent press at all levels. Not good enough if Sinclair and these other bunch glom onto things, or Jeff Bezos ripping the heart out of the New York Times. It's not an adequate way around this. Back to the fairness doctrine. Yes, in fact, that was the thing that Jackson was just discussing. You see, he's thinking of doing, Jackson is intending to do more political and cultural and social oriented videos once he's kind of through the material that he's been doing on the technical taxonomy and the material on following through on all of that evolution material. And he won't be stopping the neat stuff, but this also is relating to what's going on in our subsequent books. The mantra that I keep on using on social media is one bad method to rule them all. And this, of course, is a riff off One Ring to Rule Them All from The Lord of the Rings. It's a circumstance that there's a commonality to how people think badly. And the remedies to that are not rocket science. They are the same sound methods that anybody would go through in the historical field or in any legitimate area of inquiry. And by their fruits you shall know them, to crib a little statement from the Bible, that people of unsound method can run off the rails in a hurry. And that's why we have the possibility that RFK Jr. will be trying to head our medical institution, our medical response thing, which is just crazy Looney Tunes. How many of these oddball nutcases are actually going to be confirmed? Hard to say. I do not have a tremendous confidence that the Trumpistas in Congress, the party that used to be known as GOP, are going to be terribly good at that. They're going to show much spine. We need to watch out about whether Hegseth becomes Secretary of Defense, whether or not ideologue, conspiracy nutball Kash Patel becomes head of the Justice Department as Attorney General. I mean, these are just off the charts level of incompetent ideologues, and they're going to be making a nuisance. That's going to ruin a lot of people's lives. It won't necessarily destroy the Republic, unless they can really be busy at it and do the kinds of things that happen with that we see in Hungary, where you can hobble the free press and deck stack stuff so that you can never lose an election. And you find the same thing with left-wingers. Maduro in Venezuela operates in the same dynamic. Yes, they have elections, just like Iran has elections and Putin's Russia has elections. Yeah, right, sure. Okay, well, let me put up my advert for the Rocks Were There book, which that's our volume 1. I presume that Peter, bless his heart, may do a advert for volume 2 once we got all that out. Let me get my little screen share going here. Advert time, shameless plug. Yes, it is through bloody Amazon, but what can you do? Anyway, the principle that we're doing in our books is one of upbeat and fun. And the nice advantage is that there's no reason why you can't be ahead of the opposition instead of merely being behind the curve reactive. I had always been disappointed by some of the criticisms of creationisms done over the years that are kind of generic and they don't make as sound a case as they do. But Jackson and I are both full-out source methods people, where we argue that, one, you can pull apart the arguments at their source level to undermine any credibility they have from a scholarly point of view. And then along the way, you're bringing the reader up to speed for all of that wonderful material that isn't being discussed by the anti-evolutionists. And so that you can be ahead of the game on this, plus with the goal of a Nick Zettler style thing, that you should understand what you're dealing with and will come away from it knowing more than you did before. And that you can now be better armed in bumping into people, because we've already tackled so many subject matter and it's such current extent that it's harder. We want it to be harder and harder for the anti-evolutionists or whatever target we're dealing with to level a case. They can repeat mantras and will, but they're not going to be able to account for the data field, because it was the data field that we're calling attention to that they can't deal with, that they're not going to be able to deal with now, will they? And so by constantly being a moving target, where volume 2 will be farther ahead than we were with volume 1, just as the first book was farther ahead than what I did solo in Evolution Slam Dunk. although nothing in the material is outdated on there, but it's just broadening the data field bigger and bigger and bigger. Lecture on the environment about 2000. He was, yes, yeah, it's been a quick slippy slide with the guy. And that would be also the transformation that's gone on with that anti-vaxxer movement, where it was not as wedded to that evangelical end times QAnon crazy train then as it is now. It was more ecumenical. So the odds of encountering an anti-vaxxer amongst a trendy pot-smoking Marin County suburb person was just as easy as being somebody who is John Birch Society. Matter of fact, maybe even more so. But all of that is transformed in the course of the last 20 years. And there's been a kind of rattling downwards as all the little screwballs are kind of coagulating into a big lump of cross connections. In fact, that video that genetically engineered and Meta we're talking about with Richard Dawkins was alluding to how Dawkins has been fielded on a variety of talk shows that also put up anti-Semites and political extremists in a lot of different areas. And so, you know, these people should start paying attention to who the hell they're hobnobbing with, because it's not a pretty group. If you did to look up Paul Beckwith here on YouTube. Yeah, we've got there's a vast amount of material. And the solid end of the fact is that in one way or another, easily 3/4 of the technical literature can be obtainable somewhere open access. Or if you can't get the full material, you can certainly get detailed analyses of these things to be able to build off of. And the more of that can be shared and built up as a bulwark of a network of things, to where we routinely rely upon sources that we are willing to tell you about, and to demand of people and to make it the standard framework that people need to offer evidence for their positions, not just a position. But if you are grounding on a thing, especially if you're making a controversial contrarian position, you jolly well better have something for it. And if you do, and what you're offering is claptrap, then you need to be called out for claptrap, and certainly not made into a congressperson or put on the Supreme Court or made a governor or president of the United States. It ain't going to turn out well on those sorts of things, because if you have people steering the ship of state straight into icebergs, and they've not only not put enough lifeboats on board, but maybe they forgot to put lifeboats on at all, then it's going to be messy. So anyway, there we are. That covers the material. Next week will be another installment of our Casey Luskin source file. Don't expect any miracles to happen. That there's going to be some papers in there that aren't following up on the same thing that we've been documenting before, but bit by bit, and this will be going on for a long time, because there's over 800 supposedly of these things. When I'm done with it, I'll know exactly how many papers were on there. It'll be a complete source by source breakdown on the thing. And there's a utility to doing that. If anyone has their bee in a bonnet on any particular area of expertise, dive into it. If you have access, you can do things on YouTube just like I do. This doesn't cost anything. You can go through Restream just like I do, and set up a show and operate all of that at zero cost. Broaden the field on this and connect up with people, because if somebody has an expertise on a topic, make use of it and help educate people. And if you can enjoy and have fun doing the thing, then that's better than other. I have an advantage of being a retired person, so I got a lot of time on my hands. Although, frankly, I'm busier now than I was when I was just working standard, because it's this is my full-time gig, as it were. And I think we've been doing damn good work in the matter, and will continue to do so. This is an exciting time to live from a science point of view, unless we screw everything up and go into a new dark ages. I don't want that. Do you? No, we shouldn't do that. So anyway, everybody stay super safe. The weather here has been kind of calm. I'm wondering whether or not we're getting any snow here in Spokane, at least on my driveway level. Who knows? At least we aren't in that cataclysmic fire situation that they've got. That was an instantaneous measure of how bad those fires were, that the 2 late night talk shows that are done in Southern California, Jimmy Kimmel and After Midnight, went to reruns because they couldn't deal with the material. Everybody was had more important things on their hand to do that. So the only ones that are still live are the ones that are coming out of New York. And of course, you've got potential weather circumstances going on. I'm kind of hoping that a blizzard comes in on January 20th in Washington, D.C., so that they can't do much of any celebration in that front as we launch into stuff. And for a general point for one's ease of mind, try not to listen to anything Trump says. His press conferences and blither blathering. Remember, he's a pathological narcissist. So he's always got to be in the center of attention. I think that's part of the reason why he's trying to strong arm Greenland to give the island to us and the Panama Canal. If you just look at the consequences of his stuff and press coverage of it, rather than trying to listen to the fellow, because his voice absolutely drives me nuts. And it's so you want to punch the television screen on that. And so to avoid indigestion, don't listen to it much. So everybody stay safe. Watch out for the wooden penguins and hunker down for the next 4 years or beyond, because it's going to be a really bumpy, not nice ride for so many people in here before we can get around this. And I'm a cockeyed optimist. We got through the Great Depression and Hitler. We got through the Civil War. We got through all sorts of things in longer terms. We weathered the Black Death. So I think we will work our way around Donald Trump, but that doesn't mean it isn't snotty along the way. So everybody stay safe.